Thank you very much. So welcome to our panel discussion today where we're going to be talking about TA leader to business leader. I'm Oli Amos. I head up our consulting and strategy team at Caraffi. Caraffi, we're a talent advisory business with a very clear purpose, which is about elevating people leaders. And one of our missions is to elevate talent leaders to CPOs, and maybe one step further, CPOs to CEOs. In our role as talent advisors, we come up against a common challenge, and we're asked, why can't I be seen as a strategic business leader and not just the person that gets shouted at for not filling vacancies quickly enough? To do this, we have a really, really strong belief that TA leaders, ourselves included, need to change our mindset and understand that maybe leading TA is not the final destination. Why can't TA leaders become CPOs? Why can't CPOs become CEOs? And we believe we're going to start that conversation today in this room. Really looking forward to lots of questions. The panel have asked that they're as difficult as possible, so please don't hold back. We do have a brilliant panel today, so I'm going to pass the mic over to Vicky, who's going to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Vicky Saunders. My most recent role was at Currys, but I've been in employer branding, EVP and culture work for the last 10 years. Previous to Currys, I was at BAE Systems, where I set up their employer brand function because they didn't have one, surprisingly, as the biggest manufacturer in the UK. And before that, I was at Boots for 16 years.
Hello, everybody. My name's Connell. I suppose the first kind of thing to get across is, like most of you in this room probably didn't goal to be in TA, but ended up there. So my background, actually, I was a professional race car driver about 20 years ago, where that image was taken, I think. And I went on to study organizational psychology and behavioral neuroscience. And then from there, went into people and culture space before it was called that. I've worked in TA, I've worked in LD, I've worked in wider people and culture changes such as DEI, and mostly the tech space. So most recently Kiwi.com. So pretty busy space to be in and ever changing.
How do I follow that? Definitely not a racing car driver here, especially if you see my parking in the car park around the corner. So I'm Richard Matthews. I'm head of talent, resourcing and employee relations at the Co-operative Bank. My journey is very probably similar to a lot of people in this room in terms of falling into recruitment. So agency, in-house, RPO background, and then more recently on my journey, kind of stepping out of TA into the wonderful world of employee relations in a heavily unionised banking sector. So loving life.
I've just remembered the thing that I was supposed to say, sorry. The reason I'm up here, I think, is because I did the squiggly bit before I landed in TA. So I started out in commercial, being a store manager at Marks and Spencer's. I then became a regional manager at Royal Dalton. I then ended up in Boots, making the Here Come the Girls TV ads for 8 years. And then I went into pharmacy, developing new customer propositions in pharmacy. I then went into customer comms and then into corporate comms, so facing into the NHS, Public Health England, Department of Health, and then ended up in TA. So I've gone squiggly to end up in TA, whereas I think some of you guys will probably want to go the other way.
Thank you. Right, so we've got 3 pre-prepared questions, and then we're going to head over to the Q&A. So, Connell, I'm going to come to you first. Being seen as strategic starts with writing a strategy. When you think about the strategies you have written along the way, what have been your biggest learnings, what works, and what resonates with stakeholders?
I think the first thing, certainly with in the talent space, is so many very senior stakeholders don't know what you actually really do other than fill job roles. In actual fact, if you come in, even to some businesses as a chief people officer, you might only be seen as someone who sorts out a recruitment problem or a retention problem. And I think that, first and foremost, I've written some horrific strategies, and I think that's where you tend to find out what works best. I suppose at a very high level, I think it's a case of first and foremost, know what are your stakeholders' pain points and what do they measure the success of your strategy. And that might be a CFO saying, I want you to reduce costs, knowing that that is going to be something that resonates with them. For me as well, I think certainly within the TA team or any team within a human resource or people and culture department, you also really need to understand your neighboring teams and your relationships. And if your strategy is a success, does it create success friction for them? Is that the first time they've found out that they're going to be onboarding 1,000 people in the next 2 weeks? So it's that sort of kind of collaboration is very, very important. So also I think as well is that we have a tendency to call it our strategy, when although we are the specialists and we should be proud of that, we don't want to remain siloed in that. All of people and culture teams together, their strategy should all be pointing towards not only company benefits, but also the improvements of how that team operates and the teams around it. So they kind of be my main kind of overheads. And also, I think it's a little bit like proposing. You kind of want to know that your strategy will be accepted and signed off before you go and present it to them. So quite a lot of back channeling tends to happen as well.
Richard, something to add?
I was just going to say everyone's proposing today. It's making me very nervous, having just got married in the summer. So I think the key thing from a people strategy perspective is how you actually operationalise it. What are the differences going to be for the people on the ground, whether that be the TA teams, hiring managers, people out there. We're in a position where we've got our current CEO was our CFO, and data, return on investment. They're kind of key things that they're looking for. But from a people strategy perspective, the worst case scenario is that everyone runs around, they write a people strategy, and then 3 years later someone refers to a people strategy that was done in 2015 and no one remembers it, because actually it's not been embedded throughout an organisation. It's not kind of seen its way through. So for me, it's how do you actually kind of operationalise it to make a difference for our own teams, but also for the wider business as well.
Okay, great.
I was just going to echo on the return on investment part. I've been in HR and been in a board meeting pitching on behalf of HR, and I've been on the other side pitching against HR, pitching for more advertising money, pitching for more investment in stores, those kinds of things. And generally, I think in HR, there's a little bit of a hurdle for us because so many people are in the profession because it's vocational for them, because they care about people. They're not necessarily thinking commercially enough. And so when they get into the boardroom and they're there against the advertising team saying, we need an extra £10 million and we'll be able to give you an extra £30 million profit off the bottom of it, they're not equipped with those numbers when they go in the boardroom. And it's about understanding what that return is and knowing that will be, that you'll be pitching in effect against other areas of the business for the things that you want to do.
Agree completely. I think Danny mentioned kind of commerciality earlier on. I think that's we'll probably get to it later on in terms of the other questions, but that definitely is probably something that's kind of holding us back as a function or as an area. When we look at, we've actually got a people strategy that's been written and worked through currently as we speak, so hopefully they're not making too many changes to it while I'm here today. But one of the kind of key things in there that we've looked at from a return on investment perspective is around absence. We've got, I think ONS data came out recently. It was, averaging kind of 4.4 days absence for the year for individuals. Ours is tracking at 6.6. So we know that we've kind of run the numbers. So having a friend in finance to help you with the numbers is kind of key, really. But I've got a friend in finance, which is great. So by moving the dial slightly and by looking to tackle some of the absence issues, whether we've got kind of well-being or people leaders not being trained properly or mental health first aiders, if we can reduce that down, and it still won't be industry average, so it won't be 4.4 days, but if we can get to 5.5 days, we will save the bank £3 million for the year. So it's about having those conversations.
Brilliant, thank you.
Just one last thing that I was thinking of as well is that if we continuously have write strategies that are for the next 2 months only, or the next 3 months, or that only answer your senior stakeholders' requirements, will always be seen as tactical rather than strategic. So it's the fact that we should be creating strategies that solve immediate to midterm issues in the workforce, but also we should be kind of fixing and improving, so we're not revisiting the same issues on a cycle over and over again. And I think also simplify your message, because there are a lot of people who you will go into a boardroom who actually understand marketing, so therefore, oh, we get marketing, or, well, recruitment's easy, isn't it? I'm a person and I get people. So I think it's a case of treating it like an exec summary and having all of your notes, but easy access, but generally readable.
Brilliant, some great answers there, thank you. Right, Vicky, we're coming to you now. So when moving into a broader role, what steps did you take to prepare? What challenges did you face, and how did you overcome them?
I think that's 3 questions. Yeah, I've done the squiggly thing. Yeah, so I've moved around different departments and things. One of the first things I would say is about broadening your own knowledge. So start reading about the area that you want to move into before you move. And when you find that insight, so start reading reports and white papers and all of those things. Don't just take it all off YouTube. Nobody will believe you. But start reading that stuff and start sharing it. That shows that you are interested in the broader business rather than just your direct responsibility. The other things that I've done pretty much all the way through my career and changed around the functions is that I've always had a mentor. And that mentor I've kept for a very long time. And that person has been able to keep me on track of pointing out some of the things that are my Achilles heels. I'm really impatient. It's got slightly better since I've had children, but only a bit. And that person can keep with you regardless of where you move in an organisation. That works really well. The other thing that I've done quite a lot is when there are cross-functional projects coming up, is put your hand up. So when I was at Boots, I was in the advertising team looking after Christmas, but I would be in a meeting talking about, supply chain for the product to get to the stores on time, the delivery part of it, the pricing strategy, all of those things. It connects you with those people across the organisation, and it really does broaden your knowledge of all of the other things that are going on beyond, your world here in TA or here in HR. So I would definitely say put your hands up for cross-functional projects. Don't just represent TA, put your hand up and say, I'll represent HR. That would really help.
Yeah, I think pretty much to echo most that you've said, Vicky, it's a case of if you only study one particular thing and it's your thing, the likelihood is you're going to stay in that particular mold for the rest of your career. So it's a case of branching out into different areas. An easy route would be within the HR people team. Tying back to our first question is find out how your strategy impacts others and does it solve their pain points, and work with them. So you're addressing each other's pain points. So you're going in and you're presenting a TA strategy, an LD strategy, but as a team together. I think that's quite important. I think also as well is that unless you're very, very lucky, workload will slightly go up for you because it's a personal change management program, isn't it? So you're trying to take on new things as well as support with what your professionalism is. And I think as well is that if you think about that kind of vocational attitude of well, are we here to help people and get paid for it? That's the ultimate win. We should not necessarily stick to our specialisms and feel safe there. But in actual fact, I think HR possibly has some of the worst silos in any function in a siloed company. And I think that those who become noticeable are those who put their hands up and kind of go over the top, so to speak.
So I think one of the questions was, how did you prepare for the role? And the honest answer is I didn't. It probably, in the same way that I fell into recruitment, the ER kind of part of the role wasn't really planned. Well, certainly from my side anyway. But over the course of last year, I was having conversations with people director around, broadening out a role, trying something different. In all honesty, I thought it would go into the reward side and take on additional responsibility in there, or into our kind of more of our HR support areas, so our payroll, etc. That's where I was kind of naturally leaning to. The one area that I hadn't focused on was employee relations, and that was the first area that came up, and they were like, give it a go and try from there. So I think the biggest part for me was actually bring your teams with you on that journey. Exactly what you said there around actually your workload is going to increase, your hairline is going to reduce, the bags under your eyes are going to get bigger. So you need to make sure that you can, elevate your team, bring them on that journey with you, making sure that succession planning is in place, because otherwise, it's just, it's a house that's built on really poor foundations and you'll fall over.
And putting you on the spot, if you had to share the biggest mistake you've made going into a new role, what could others learn from that?
Where do we begin? Biggest mistake, I would say not being honest with myself at the start around shortcomings. So, probably, actually I can pick this up really quickly, I'll pick this up really easy, but to Vicky's point, without really, really taking that time to become an expert. I'm really fortunate in the ER space that I've got some brilliant experts. We're heavily unionised, so you have to be. So falling back on the teams, being humble and then kind of, learning from the teams, I think was kind of critical. They knew that I wasn't an ER expert, so I can't fake that. I wouldn't want to fake that. So yeah, just being honest and open probably earlier, and not worrying, that kind of imposter syndrome, not worrying about not being an expert, and having your team support you, I think was critical.
A mistake that I made a couple of times, but I think when I moved from corporate comms into employer branding, I inherited the Boots career site, which has 1.8 million visits a year, 20,000 visits a day. It's a big company, yes. 60,000 people work for Boots. And I didn't know anything about SEO, PPC. I didn't know what a bounce rate was. I didn't know anything about time on page. And I remember my HR director, who's Nathan Clements at the time, asking me about some of the data, and I tried to blag it. I tried to say what I thought it would, what it was, and I rapidly found out, I felt like the floor was opening underneath me, that he actually knew quite a lot about websites. So that didn't go down very well, and I've never done that ever again. After that, I then reached out to the guy who looks after SEO for Boots.com, because he knew his shit, So he came and started helping me to understand everything that I needed to know to be able to run a website of that scale. And so the learning for me that the change I've put in place is, when I don't know, I do just ask for help now. I don't try and blag it, because it comes back to bite you.
Great. There's a real theme of humility coming through in these key steps. Right, last question. Richard, back to you. We've never seen a CPO in a FTSE 350 business become a CEO. What's stopping us, and how can we break that?
Probably quite a few things. I think that kind of commerciality is definitely key. I think that in some ways, everyone has been through an interview process. Everyone in every company has touched recruitment at some point. So they therefore think they're the experts in it in some way, shape or form. We see that quite often in terms of, well, I applied for a job in 1997, so why can't we do it this way? Now why have things changed? I think we need to just elevate what we do, and we are the experts, so be confident in it. But back to the kind of commerciality point, we need to be willing to kind of broaden out, be willing to learn new things, be willing to try different areas. Because actually, if you look at it, a CPO being a CEO all of the 90% of the organisations out there will say that they want to have a really, reduce attrition, have a great people strategy, want to be winning all these awards for their people, and actually don't give it enough focus. They're too focused on the kind of traditional routes in terms of COO to CEO or CFO up. So there's, unless we kind of break down those barriers and really understand the finances, get a bit kind of scary with worrying about bottom lines and return on investments, we need to be having those kind of conversations and probably not being afraid to really go for it. I think that's probably what's kind of holding us back slightly. Hopefully it will kind of come sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think historically, I think it's usually been the COO was the CEO's right-hand person. So therefore, they knew all the operations of a business, knew what everyone kind of did, more or less. CFO, well, they will make sure that our bottom line and our reports for investors will look good, so that's fine. And it's interesting enough because a CFO and a COO, they're not really tasked to understand people as part of their remit. If you think about a chief people officer or a chief HRO, they're absolutely targeted at that. But in order for us to step up in an equal powering of some of the other C-suite members who moved to CEO, I think we also need to know everything about their remits as well. I think it's integrated knowledge in the same way as how do you go from a TA leader to being a CPO? Why are the majority of people who are CPOs come from a HR generalist background? It's because they have integrated knowledge, sometimes good, sometimes weak, in all the different areas. So I think knowing how to understand, I think, business metrics and management information first, not blagging it before you present it, and show your knowledge, hint at your knowledge of other areas. You'll only do that by networking with the right people. If you've no idea about finance and you're a CPO, speak to a recruiter who hires CFOs. What are the things that they are looking for, etc. So I think that's kind of the main reason. It's more about your HR though, aren't you? You just do recruitment and reduction in force. What would you know about running a business? So we need to kind of break that mold, and we can only do that by being active.
I think the tide is moving in our favour, though, a little bit. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, shareholders were almost suddenly, out of the blue, really interested in ESG, so sustainability, etc. And there was a hell of a lot of a change in big organisations, certainly that I was in, around shifting the sustainability agenda, partly because it was the right thing to do, but partly because that's what shareholders were interested in, not just the profit that they would get back from that organisation, but how they were conducting themselves as a global business. And I think that's starting to move now in our favour, in that shareholders are increasingly asking quite difficult questions of the organisations that they invest in about diversity, about inclusion, about well-being, about, do you know what I mean, some of these other things. And so I think now is the time to start influencing the chief financial officer about the role HR plays in terms of investor relations.
Brilliant, thank you. Tash, I think we're going to go to Slido questions.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't prepared for that. Hold on, sorry. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. That was really insightful. So we've got opening up the floor to sort of general questions coming through, and I've been peeking at them, and there's some quite good ones, but you guys can't see them, I don't think. So a tough question that we're going to start with is, how do you remain the expert in the room when everyone thinks they know or can do recruitment? Happy for anyone to kick it off.
Back to the data theme for today, really. It's data, it's using it, it's using the impact of data. For us, we've got a contact centre which is in Skelmersdale, which is a place I didn't know until I kind of moved up north 12 years ago. And actually there was a lot of background kind of thoughts in terms of the locational hub, but we do use talent data. We use labour market insights that are evolving all the time from one of your partners today, actually, at Horsefly. It's been critical to really just breaking down the kind of barriers and those conversations. People will naturally think they understand it because they've been through that interview process, or their daughter or son has just started a graduate job and this is how it works at that X, Y and Z company. But having the data and the metrics that are evolving all the time. Since we've been in the room today, people have moved jobs, they've accepted offers, they've declined offers, and the whole labour market has shifted while we've been in here. Sorry to scare anyone. So I think it's that data, back to that data point.
I think to that point as well, data is absolutely huge, and I think it's presenting data that's understandable to your stakeholders first and foremost, because so much of what we do isn't really understood thoroughly by an awful lot of the people we may report up to. We sometimes have a tendency to dump and to prove what we do, and sometimes adding data isn't necessarily a good thing. So it's getting the actual data in a way that you can actually build your point across, and also that you understand what everyone else's data is saying as well.
Yeah, there's a follow-on question from this as well, which is what are the important business metrics that TA impacts or can impact the most? What would your thoughts be on that, Vic? I think you were going to grab the mic then.
I think productivity comes to the top of mind, because then that impacts on turnover and profit. So productivity, and obviously what feeds into productivity are things like absence, and you can make a business case almost around everything, whether it's L&D that makes someone more effective at doing their job, that means that they give better customer service, which turns into greater profit. I think the one that I've heard talked about in boardrooms most from HR has been around productivity.
Just, I think to add, especially if you've got an organisation that has a high part of your business is around sales, linking TA's performance, new joiners to sales is great. I think Danny spoke about it earlier, or someone else. Apologies if I've given Danny your credit. But I think that's a really, really good way to change the conversation and talk about actually impacting the top or bottom line.
Yeah, I think for me, certainly in the kind of the tech world, we're hearing an awful lot of not just productivity, but sustained productivity. And I think the reason that we're getting more and more of a voice in boardrooms is because an awful lot of the investors, be it VC or be it private equity, they know that after 3 years, probably most of their C-suite will leave. And if it's all held together with duct tape and cable ties and the people agenda isn't strong, it'll all fall to pieces, and then their investment will go down the drain.
Yeah, agree with everything you've said there in terms of metrics. I think the absence one is a big one for us, reducing attrition. That kind of leaky bucket of TA, having to re-recruit roles that you recruited 8 months ago. It's critical.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a question. I'm going to sort of jump around a little bit on some of the questions because I've got a flow in my head that I think might work. So bear with me on this one. What areas of the business does a TA skill set translate to? Sometimes, and I think there's probably quite a few people that would agree, sometimes it feels like you're in a very narrow vertical without scope to branch outside of TA or HR, perhaps that more broader people role. If you could branch out into another area, where would you go, or do you think that's a very personal approach?
Sorry.
It's like I've baffled everyone there.
No, that's fine. So no, I think you didn't at all. I think naturally we're all in this room, well, most of us are in this room because we like dealing with people and having conversations with people. So from a relationship perspective, I think it's we can build those very, very easily. So we could move into different areas. We could certainly move into project management. We could certainly move into, sales. We could certainly move into anything that was kind of relationship led. But I think it's, for me, my kind of key skill or my kind of key desire is leadership, really. So actually you could probably put me anywhere apart from finance. You could probably put me anywhere else, and I'd be able to, certainly be able to, work with our IT guys. I certainly would be able to work in different areas because of that relationship side of things.
Yeah. What about the rest of the panel?
I think what I see HR professionals doing brilliantly is wanting to continuously improve things, whether that's for people or for the business to make it more efficient. And that skill set can go anywhere. So anything which is transformation related, about assessing processes and programs and that iterative continuous improvement, whether that's some kind of new program or it's in the operations of the business, that's definitely where I think there's more capacity for moves.
Yeah.
Yeah, same for myself, actually. I've found myself in lots of different roles in HR and TA, and I think it's a case of we're slowly moving away from job titles and 15 years of tenure, which could be 15 years of 1 year's experience on loop. And we're now looking to see a lot more skill-based organizations rising up, where they're not only just the data set, but the skills data is really, really valuable for both sourcing people externally and also building up people internally. So I think you can self-limit yourself if you only simply say, what if I'm seen or perceived to be like this because of my current skill set? Like it's been said by the rest of the panel, we're used to dealing with people. We generally tend to be, not always, but we generally tend to make decent managers by default compared to other aspects of the business. And I think it's a case of, like you're saying, if you really notice that you can make a difference somewhere, it doesn't matter what your skill sets is. If you're actually able to identify it and also help implement it, then lo and behold, your job role will change.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I wouldn't underestimate taking the opportunity to go into the operations of what your business does. I think you can really, really learn how the business works, and it gives you extra influence and credit when you then try and do a bigger role in the future, because many of the skills that we have in this sector are transferable around leadership.
Yeah, excellent. During the break, we were talking about the power of the brand name. How important do you think it is to have big names, big brand names on your CV in order to get that CEO position? Or do you think it depends on the company that you're going to?
I think it depends who the, I suppose, decision makers are. If you have venture capitalists, huge, big, like a General Atlantic, who are looking for a new CEO, they obviously will have their own kind of requirements for their search and exclusion and inclusion criteria. I think it's difficult. I think we potentially are on the back foot going towards a CEO position. But for me personally, I see lots of CVs and they have Google. You find out they've been in Google for 16 months. If they're in Google in 16 months in the 80s, that's an interesting 16 months. If they've been at Google for the last 16 months and were unfortunately laid off, doesn't necessarily mean they're bringing Google to your business. So just make sure it's not a shiny object. I think investors, if they're employing a CEO, they look for actual evidence of execution and delivery of revenue, etc.
Yeah, I was going to just add to that, your point about the CEO. When I've spoken to our exec search teams, mostly at Boots, actually, so we've probably got about 300 directors at SLT level who are obviously brought into the business through the exec team rather than the standard recruitment team, and they will talk very much about impact assessment. They're looking for the impact people have had in the organisations that they've been in, and they're also interested in the purpose behind those organisations and whether that purpose and their values align with the organisation that we're bringing them into. So it isn't necessarily, at least in my experience at Boots, it wasn't about which brand they came from, but it was about impact assessment of what they'd achieved and the purpose and values of the organisation they come from.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So I really agree with the big shiny objects analogy. I think from having been someone who's actually recruited for our kind of CEO and been involved in those conversations and with our board recently when we've built out our kind of exco, the key thing they're looking for actually sometimes is more of a similarity in terms of brand. So actually, for example, Co-op Bank, there's absolutely no point in us trying to target or bring in the CEO of Goldman Sachs. Literally, there couldn't be, same industry, but there couldn't be further from probably our values, our ethics, understanding what makes a kind of a UK retail bank. So I think even within your industry, it's they'll probably be looking for more kind of similarities. If we were looking, we would look now probably at a TSB, probably at a Nationwide, probably at maybe Shawbrook or one of the kind of challenger banks that are kind of coming up. We definitely wouldn't be going down the kind of old school investment banking route.
Excellent. We are we are out of time, but I'm going to ask one final question. I'm going to ask you to be very brief on it. If you could each recommend one book, what would it be? Who's going first? In a race.
Do you know what I'm going to say?
I think I do.
I'm going to say Now Discover Your Strengths by Marcus Buckingham. Is that what you thought I was going to say?
No.
I read it 12 years ago, and it's totally changed my career. Absolutely changed it. It makes you very aware of what you're good at. You understand much more about yourself, and that sets you up really clearly about what is in line with your strengths and your values and what you're prepared to do and not do. And yeah, it's been totally changed. Change breaker? Change breaker's not a word, is it?
We can make it a word. It's
Yeah.
fine.
It is now.
Excellent.
I think on topic, and I forget who the author is, I'm sorry, but there's a cracking book called Squiggle. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of the book called Squiggle, and it literally is talking about people's career developments isn't linear or it isn't necessarily in steps. If you think about going back to, I know, famous people who apparently weren't very nice to work for, Steve Jobs, when he went to university, for example, and university is one place he can learn, he went to things that interested him. You know, you find a lot of people, I think I would look for also career diversity as well in people, the fact that they've tried different things and they've more honed into what they want. So I will post it on LinkedIn if I can find out the name of the author, but the book's called Squiggle.
Thank you.
I'm going to go a bit off topic and not go for a book and go for a podcast, if that's all right.
Well,
so,
sure.
So I would go for the High Performance podcast, and the reason I would say that is because it's a variety of different sectors. There's people that are quite open about their challenges, where they've got to today. It's not always a straight line. It can be a squiggle, and you know, for me, that's always got some really interesting stories and backgrounds to different individuals.
Excellent. Oli?
I'm going to have two because they're on the similar topic. So the 4-hour work week and the subtle art of not giving a, because they both reinforce the need to be really, really focused on the things that are really, really important and to shut out the noise. And I think we hear a lot in our industry about all the challenges faced with managing the day-to-day, being proactive and being strategic. So being able to be highly prioritized. The 4-hour work week.
Whoever's writing notes, I can't write any. Can you give me the notes as well? Amazing. We are out of time, I'm afraid. Absolutely brilliant session, as always. Thank you so much to all of you. Big round of applause.